Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Sodha, and the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Welcome to both of you. So let's take a look, shall we, at the front pages, starting with the Metro, which describes the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock as king of the bungle after his decision to fly to Australia to appear on I'm a Celebrity while Parliament is in session and the COVID inquiry is underway. In an interview with The Sun, Mr Hancock insists he knows what he's doing. The Star depicts him as one of the creepy crawlies he might be forced to eat on the show. The Mirror describes him as the man with no shame. Meanwhile, The Guardian reports that the government has drawn up emergency plans for how to deal with winter blackouts that could last for a week. The Eye carries predictions that householders could soon be paying an additional £880 a year towards their mortgages. Reports of massive profits for oil firms like BP, ExxonMobil and Saudi Aramco is prompting pressure for them to do more to assist people with the cost of living. That's the lead for the FT. The Mail has a story concerning worries over the vetting of candidates to join the police force and claims that there are thousands of corrupt officers on our streets. And that is also the lead story for The Times. Criminals and sexual predators join the police, they say. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you can see on screen, you can check out the front pages while you watch our guests. So let's head to them, shall we? And speak to Sonia Sodha and Henry Hill. Yes, leading a number of the newspapers, Sonia. It is, as the Metro puts it, king of the bungle, the news that Matt Hancock is heading to Australia.
I'm sure your viewers will be absolutely delighted to hear this, Anna. He is indeed heading to Australia. Reportedly, he's being paid a three-figure sum. One paper's estimated that it might be as much as £335,000 to take part in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which is, of course, the ITV reality show where contestants have to do things like eat kangaroo testicles. There's a lot of anger about this tonight. I think on the surface of it, maybe it seems like quite a light story, but I think the reason why people are angry about it is twofold. First of all, he's a sitting MP and he's being paid quite a lot of money actually to represent his constituents. So why is he going off to the jungle for a month to command another salary for doing something else? And then there are also a number of COVID people who lost relatives through COVID who've spoken out about it and said that they think it's really disrespectful. I think overall, though, I'm not sure this is a great PR move for Matt Hancock. I think on these sorts of reality shows, you sort of have to have quite a soft side sometimes to do well. And I'm not sure that Matt Hancock is really sort of best suited to that. Although, let's see, I suppose.
Well, indeed. Kezia Dugdale, former Scottish Labour leader, who herself appeared on reality TV, said normally a politician would go on for one or more of three reasons. One, to gain profile, two, to get money, or three, to promote a cause. He says he's going to promote, his campaign on dyslexia, for which he has suffered. But looking at The Sun as well, Henry, I've not lost my marbles, he says. But The Sun pointing out that he will skip dozens of votes while still claiming his £84,000 salary during 3 weeks of filming. The clamour for that money to at least get ditched will no doubt grow. But, this is taken very seriously by a lot of people, isn't it?
It is, and I am more of a defender of MPs having second jobs than most. I think very often it allows people to bring valuable experience to the House of Commons. I don't think this is an example of that, and it is egregious that he is taking so much time out in the middle of a parliamentary term. Fundamentally, the job of a member of Parliament is to be present for votes and represent their constituents. I also think, I've actually had a read of the interview in The Sun. I think I disagree with Matt Hancock. He says it would be patronising to assume that TV formats such as this are beneath politicians, but actually, I think it's fairly patronising to claim that there are lots of people out there who can only get political messages through light entertainment programmes like I'm a Celebrity. I think most TV viewers are sophisticated enough that they can watch that for the entertainment that it is and get their politics elsewhere. I think it's slightly absurd to pretend that he's going to have any sort of great amount of time whilst appearing on this show to promote any cause. And ultimately, it's bad for, this is going to make me sound like 100 years old perhaps, but it's quite bad for the dignity of politics. Right? I think fundamentally people expect a certain standard from the people who represent us in public life. Now, in recent years, that hasn't always been upheld, to put it very mildly. But I think that every MP has a responsibility to conduct themselves in a way that kind of adds as much as possible to the dignity of the institution in which they represent us. And this is the very polar opposite of that.
Well, indeed, Nadine Dorries used exactly that same argument. You reach a new audience and lo and behold, she appears back in cabinet. So maybe his front bench hopes are not yet dashed by doing this. Who knows? But certainly the COVID issue, the inquiry is one area which people are up in arms against, but also clearly the cost of living issues, the energy crisis. If we head to The Guardian, Sonia, your picture froze there. Oh, you're back. That's fine. You're blinking. That's absolutely fine. The Guardian revealed the secret war game plans to cope with 7-day blackouts. Now, this is more than was billed originally, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is The Guardian reporting on contingency planning that's happening across Whitehall, and it's apparently been stepped up because there are fears over energy security because of the war in Ukraine, essentially. We've also been hearing in recent weeks that there are fears that, the energy... So I guess there's a concern that it might be used as a geopolitical weapon by Putin, by sort of shutting down gas supplies even further. But also the Met Office are predicting a colder winter. It's obviously been quite mild, but they're forecasting a cold winter. And I think there's a genuine concern that at some point we might run out. And I think it's absolutely right that Whitehall are sort of stress testing. I've actually, interestingly, already had an email from my energy company who've asked me, because I've got a smart meter, to take part in these sorts of challenges to stop using energy at busy times of the day. I think we're going to see more of that from energy companies. And I think what they're going to try and do is encourage people to reduce their usage at peak times so we can avoid the risk of blackouts. Because obviously, if there are blackouts, then you've got to be very, very concerned about vulnerable people who really can't be in the dark and the cold. And that's what a lot of this contingency planning is about. So hopefully it's not going to happen. But this contingency planning is happening. And it sounds like it's happening in a more sort of energetic way than it would have been done a couple of years ago because of the greater risk to energy security that there are at the moment.
Yes, 4 till 7 p.m. in the evening, they said, was the peak time, wasn't it? With, kids coming home, people returning from work and so on. Meantime, how to plug the black hole on a day when BP was the latest to reveal its profit revelations, Henry. And the COP26 president, Alok Sharma, he will be outgoing, of course, by next week in terms of COP, has called for oil and gas companies to be hit by a higher windfall tax. Do we know if that is on the agenda?
I think if you're the Chancellor and the Prime Minister and you're trying to fill an absolutely extraordinary hole in the public finances, and you have before you an array of very unpalatable options, such as tax increases on working people and cuts to pensions and welfare, then yeah, the idea of hitting the oil companies again is definitely going to be fairly high up on the agenda. I think the only question is really, how much extra wriggle room can they find? Energy profits from the North Sea, for example, are already subject to, I think, 2 windfall taxes because the government's already planning to increase it. And it's important that it is structured in such a way as to make sure that these companies are still incentivized to invest in both bringing new supply on stream so that we can reduce our dependence on Vladimir Putin's Russia and, of course, to invest in renewables. But absolutely, given the scale of the challenge facing the government and the number of unpopular choices they're going to have to make, this is almost certainly going to look like an easy win.
Yes, and public sector workers facing deep real-term cuts was reported in the Times today, wasn't it? Also on that page in the Metro, actually, suggestions of a fall in house prices being blamed on the Kwarteng mini-budget, literally. Nationwide's chief economist, for example, saying the market was undoubtedly been impacted by the turmoil following that mini-budget. But if we look at the mortgage bills, suggestion that they could go up by £880. The Bank of England expected to raise interest rates, they say tomorrow, but of course this is Wednesday's paper, so that would be Thursday, by 0.75 points. And originally, Sonia, they wanted those Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts ahead of this meeting of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, which is not now happening.
That's right. And I think this is more bad cost of living news for people. There's lots of people who've been worried about the cost of mortgages for a long time now. And it is predicted that the Bank of England, as you say, Anna, on Thursday is going to put up mortgage rates to 3%. It's the biggest rise that there's been, I think it's since 1989, the story says. And it's the highest level of base interest rates since the 2008 financial crisis. And we've all been living with these very, very low interest rates over the last decade. So the calculations are that on the average tracker mortgage, that's going to push your mortgage up, the average one, by about £900 a year. Lots of people are on fixed term mortgages, though, fixed rate mortgages rather. But they are, there's a lot of those mortgages that are expiring in the next 2 years, and then people are going to have to fix again or go on to variable rates. And so I think, on top of what we've seen with energy bills, to face, say, an extra grand a year on your mortgage repayments, it's just adding extra financial load onto people, I think. And the concern has to be for people for whom they're just not going to be able to service that mortgage anymore, that mortgage repayment.
Yes, and costs falling elsewhere. The Eye pointing out that the NHS budget is protected, but struggling hospitals are already being told to find savings to boost their performance. I mean, this is extraordinary, isn't it, if you think about it, Henry? The promise was tax cuts and a golden era of growth under Liz Truss. And here we are now with the prospect of tax rises and public spending cuts. How unpalatable is that? For Tory members, for example, do you think?
I mean, it's going to be, especially for Conservative MPs, it's going to be absolutely poisonous for them because, of course, they were elected in 2019 on a completely different manifesto that was much more comfortable with public investment, which was really geared towards trying to persuade millions of voters who voted for the Tories for the first time in 2019 that actually this was a kind of new-look Conservative party with different priorities. Now, unfortunately, the economic situation has changed a lot, but that doesn't take away from the fact that in many ways the Conservatives have kind of wasted 3 years and a lot of years of really low interest rates in which they could have prioritised some of these projects. So it's going to be very hard for Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt to find a package of measures which Tory MPs are going to be happy with. I think, fortunately for them, with the polls as bad as they are, those MPs don't really have much of a choice. This government absolutely has to stay on its feet, and the only way it can stay on its feet is by passing a fiscal statement. So they will vote for something, but it's going to be extremely painful for the party, and it remains to be seen whether or not Rishi Sunak. He's going to try and build, I think, some headroom into the figures so that hopefully ahead of a general election in 2024, he can try and find some room for some spending or some tax cuts. But it will be hard to see how he can do it if the 2 years are as hard as some people are forecasting.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. We are joined once again by Sonia Soda and Henry Hill. Welcome back to both of you. And let's talk about policing, shall we, Henry? Two newspapers leading on it, the Daily Mail and the Times. Policing standards concerns. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is a report by the Ombudsman, which basically highlights several ways in which the way that the police recruit and vet recruits is allowing either predators or people with links to organised crime or numerous other problems to come onto the force and stay in the force. Some of these things include, apparently, if a police officer transfers from one force to another, safeguarding concerns are actually not transmitted with them. So if, say, one local force had got worries that a police officer was either collaborating with criminals or was preying on people or whatever, and that person moves, that's it. They get a clean slate when they move to the new department. Others are apparently not doing face-to-face interviews with new recruits, which again just doesn't give you an opportunity to get to grips with who you're bringing on. Now, given some of the recent stories about the police and the crimes committed by police officers and the position of trust they have in society, this is extraordinary. And it's vitally important that I think the Home Secretary, who obviously has a lot on her plate at the moment, finds the time to make sure that the police forces in England and Wales get a grip on this issue as soon as possible.
Yes, and the end result of those recruitment failures is horrifying if you listen to this report. The Guardian suggesting that vetting of police lets predators join the force, and the Times too suggesting that police recruits with links to serious organised crime and histories of predatory behaviour have passed official vetting. I mean, this is deeply concerning, is it not, for members of the public, Sonia?
It absolutely is. And I think the thing about jobs like being a police officer is that it's always going to attract some very good people who want to devote their life to public service and keeping communities safe. But it's also likely to attract not to put too fine a point on it, but abusive narcissists, because it's a job that offers control, a lot of power. And so police forces need to have very strong ways of filtering those personality types out. It's also obviously going to be a magnet for organised crime if they can get corrupt officers in there. Again, if there's no way of filtering them out. And I think it's really jaw-dropping, actually, reading this report. It sounds like police forces up and down the country don't even have the most basic standards for who's coming through the door. And then we wonder why we have stories, most notably, for example, in the case of Sarah Everard, a serving Met officer raping and murdering a young woman, but also police officers behaving in the most appalling racist ways, sharing racist abuse, misogynistic abuse. I just think, we've had so many reports now coming out about standards in the police. You just got to think, what is it going to take for them to get a grip on this?
You've got a quick 30, 40 seconds, Henry or Sonia, I don't know who wants it, on The Crown, the controversies, the Panorama interview. Who wants to go? Put your hand up.
I don't mind taking it.
I thought you were going to be polite there, but anyway, carry on. Go for it.
Well, so this is The Crown's last series, which is yet to come out, but it will obviously be the most recent, and it's getting into the sort of fallout between Princess Diana and Prince Charles, Diana's death, and it's going over some extremely sensitive territory, and her sons are still alive. Reportedly, it's going to include excerpts of the actress playing the sort of Panorama interview, and then an actor playing William watching it and looking distressed. And I think The Crown's a brilliant drama. I think it does mix fact and fiction too much, actually. But I think, getting into such recent living history, it's not even really history. I think
Sonia?
it really does cross the line.